Hi, everybody. I am your host for this RealAg Live, Lyndsey Smith. Welcome here on this Tuesday, March 23rd. At least I'm pretty sure that's what day it is. This is going to be an interesting one because, again, I feel like my internet connection is giving me grief. But most importantly, I get to host a topic that is, of course, near and dear to all of our farmers' hearts, and that is the weather. So joining me for today's live is Brett Anderson. He's the senior meteorologist with AccuWeather. Welcome here, Brett. How are you?
Hi, doing great.
Good. Okay. So this is we're here third week of March. Maple syrup season out here in Ontario is rolling slash maybe wrapping up. And was talking to several agronomists in Western Canada yesterday, and definitely the biggest concern for the West is dryness. So maybe let's start in the West and we'll work our way east. Catch us up just on how dry we're starting out right now before we look ahead.
Yeah, I was just looking at some statistics. Now, Environment Canada is usually a little bit slow updating their data. I wish it was a little bit faster, but latest information we have up through March 1st is that much of southern Saskatchewan, right up through southwestern Manitoba, soil moisture is only running 40% or less compared to normal. So well below normal. Those areas are also in severe to extreme drought already. So that's a big red flag here as we get later into the season. Certainly a big concern.
So Lara, my coworker here with Real Agriculture, she's based in Calgary, and she noted there was a blanket of snow there last night. I did see some tweets out of Manitoba, a bit of snow falling, but it's a skiff. Like it's
Yeah,
not a significant amount of snowfall, right? So,
yeah, just like much of the winter's been. It's not
yeah,
much
well,
snow.
there is that. Okay, so as you mentioned, we're at this point, um, give or take a couple weeks, we're already in a pretty huge deficit. So looking forward, do you have good news in the trends and the forecasts, or I'm a little afraid to
Yeah,
ask, I'll be
I don't have
honest.
any good news. I'm not going to say it's bad news, but I'm not going to say I do not have any. I'm looking for good news. I just don't see it right now. Uh, right now, we're still under the influence of a La Nina. What is a La Nina? That's the abnormal cooling of the Pacific waters along the equator. And what that does, it alters the jet stream pattern across the Pacific. And usually when we have a La Nina, we typically see most of our storms coming up through British Columbia, fairly strong ones at that. And then once they cross the mountains, as they usually do, they pretty much dissipate and lose all their moisture and get a lot of wind and dry weather across the prairie region. Now, it looks like La Nina is slowly weakening a little bit, but its influence is going to persist likely through the spring. So what does that tell me? It tells me more storminess across British Columbia, but then again, as we get into the prairie region, it does look like warmer, slightly drier conditions will likely dominate through a good part of the spring, which again is not very good news we want to hear for much of this drought region. And so if this forecast does pan out, I'm very concerned that we could be seeing expanding extreme drought later in the spring. And if that's the case, usually if we have those type of conditions late in spring, it just gets a lot worse during the summer, and it gets a lot drier, and it also gets a lot hotter. So hopefully things turn around here April and May, but right now the forecast does not suggest that at this point.
So what would it take to potentially turn that around? How does the La Nina dissipate?
Yeah, it's the winds, the changing of winds across the Pacific, and that moves water, surface water from west to east across the region. So we're seeing some indications of it weakening, but I just don't, nothing that I've looked at lately suggests a steady weakening of this. And there's also a delay factor, or the influence of La Nina or El Nino. There's a delay factor. So even though it may be weakening, its influence is still going to be felt for several months as it's weakening. So right now, that's the strongest influence still as we go into the spring is going to be La Nina. And unless we see that completely shut down, I don't see much change in the storm track coming into British Columbia and then leaving much of the southern prairies warmer and slightly drier than normal.
Okay, so not the greatest news for those who are looking for that moisture, unfortunately. Although I suppose it's a bit of a warning, which we are ahead of the seeding season, so farmers can, I suppose, do what they can to conserve what
Yes.
soil moisture is there. So I mean that's something if you're anticipating a dry spring. Now I recognize that, forecasting can only go so far into the future. So when you're looking right now in your forecasting models, sort of how far ahead do you go that you have some sort of certainty? Is it a week, 2 weeks,
Well,
three
usually two
days?
weeks now. When I first started, obviously 30 years ago, it was pretty much a week. Now it's 2 weeks where we have pretty good confidence, especially during the colder months when the jet stream is stronger. During the summer, it's a little less certain because much of the rainfall you're dependent on in the summer is due to thunderstorms, and long-range forecast models really have a real terrible time trying to figure those things out.
Mhm.
And with a weaker jet stream, just the long range forecasts are tougher. But when we're dealing with late fall, winter, and a good part of spring, forecast modeling, well, we can get a pretty good idea what the general pattern is going to be at least 2 weeks out. So that's what we're looking at. Now, when we're making seasonal forecasts, we have to look out, 2, 3, 4 months ahead. And so we're very dependent on things like La Nina and El Nino to help steer us. When we do not have an El Nino year or a La Nina year, we have to look at other things. So we have to look at water temperatures. We have to look at analogs. What's an analog? An analog is looking back, finding similarities between what's been going on this year with the weather pattern with other years going back like 50 years, and we pick out certain years that match up, and then we try to push ahead, this next season over and see what the following summer was like in those particular years. And that gives us an analog, gives us a little bit of a clue, perhaps. One thing I'm seeing similar to this in the terms of the drought in the spring, going into the spring, at least through February, is looks fairly similar to 2018 right now. Hopefully that'll change, but late 2018, it was quite dry in the summer, later in the summer across the southern prairies. So that's one year that I noticed recently that looks similar to what we're dealing with right now.
Okay, and for all of you following along at home, if anyone wants to comment, I highly recommend that you do. We love hearing where you're from, any questions you have. But to this point, if you're showing an analogous year as 2018, I'd love to know how they did in 2018. Let's see how
Yeah.
it turned out for you, and let's see. So anybody who wants to hop on and let me know, was 2018 a good year, not so good? Let me know, because that it is fascinating to me, really, in the science of weather, that we do have years that are similar, and factors that led up to a similar year, but of course just how volatile or just how extreme or not at all they become is, of course, the stories that we tell in our harvests and what the spring seeding season was like, and all those sorts of things. So not always great stories. I know that this morning we were discussing here at Real Agriculture, within just our own group, we were talking about just how early people in farm families had, their earliest seeding date ever in Western Canada, and whether or not it turned out. And for those very extreme, very early ones, it did not. So,
Mhm.
so if that's any indication, maybe everybody can just keep the equipment parked for a little bit.
We like normal, but
Yes,
it's never normal.
average. Yeah, average is good.
Yes,
I like average, right?
yeah, it's hard to get that.
Now, yeah, exactly. Now, okay, one question though, and I'm glad you brought up the water temps and not a La Nina, not an El Nino. How often did these phenomenon happen? Or like,
Uh,
is it? Yeah, how does that work?
yeah, usually, we have strong La Ninas, strong El Ninas, weak and La Ninas, weak El Ninos, but typically they last, in general, 9 months or so on average, but they can last as long as 2 years sometimes. But on
Okay.
average, usually a La Nina or an El Nino lasts about 9 months, and we'll see usually a La Nina every 3 years, an El Nino maybe every 2 to 4 years or so. So And then in between, you get these neutral years, which kind of give seasonal forecasters headaches, because then we have to kind of go back to the drawing board and figure out a lot of other things going on. So again, La Nina and El Nino are our strongest signals that we depend on when we make these seasonal forecasts. So if we have a strong El Nino, a strong La Nina, that really gives us a lot of clues, especially the western half of Canada, because that's obviously closest to the Pacific. As you go farther east, the influence of that is a little bit less. So that's some of the things we look at.
Okay, and actually that's a fantastic segue into moving us. Let's head east then into Eastern Canada. Of course, when I say Eastern Canada, I really mostly mean Ontario, Southern Ontario, Eastern Ontario. Although if you have an outlook for Atlantic Canada, I'm sure we have some listeners that would love to hear it. But let's focus on Ontario for now. Where are we sitting as far as averages? What's at play there?
Yeah, it's been kind of a mixed bag in Ontario. We're not in any drought or anything like that. Obviously, some areas had less snow than usual, and it was fairly mild. I will say much of the winter, as you said, has been mild in terms of temperature, but we kind of had a mixed bag in terms of snowfall. Some areas we actually had above normal snowfall, others near to below normal. But as it stands right now, no signs of developing drought. And based on our forecast for the spring, I think the storm track is going to continue to be directed up through the Great Lakes, which would mean near to above normal rainfall through the spring months. So you see that forecast. One thing you say, well, it doesn't look like we're going to be dealing with a drought, and I agree with that. But the other thing is there going to be flooding? Well, again, lack of snowfall, lack of snowpack, rivers running near to below normal. I would say the risk of flooding is probably near average for late spring flooding across much of Ontario at this point. I wouldn't go below or above at this point, but I don't see anything really glaring at this stage to predict widespread significant flooding across Ontario. So a wetter spring in Ontario, and it looks generally a little bit milder than normal as well.
Okay. So, as you said, La Nina doesn't necessarily have as great an impact on Ontario, or as you move east, does it have any impact?
Yeah, it does. It tends to, again, as I said, it favors a storm track into British Columbia, but also favors a secondary storm track, typically Colorado lows, storms that form over the Southern Rockies and move up towards the Great Lakes. We did not see that as much as we thought we would, especially the first half of this winter, with storms moving more towards the coast, which is kind of unusual in a La Nina year, but we started to see that storms moving up towards the Great Lakes. We're actually going to have a pretty good storm coming up here later this week with a lot of rain. So that's classic La Nina, storms moving up through the Great Lakes and delivering a good amount of precipitation. And our forecast was for above normal snowfall this winter in Ontario and much of Quebec. Again, it was kind of a mixed bag there, but also a milder winter, which ended up being correct because, again, with a southwesterly track of storms, that kind of cuts off all the Arctic air for much of Ontario and Quebec. So it wasn't a very cold winter, certainly. Most of that cold stayed up across the Northwest.
Yeah, I can attest to that for sure. I am just west of Ottawa. We are typically in a snow belt. We definitely had a snowy February, but other than that, actually, we really didn't have a ton of snow. And I'm not going to complain because we actually went into the fall in decent moisture conditions. So as much as, some snow is good and we like snow cover for sure, don't get me wrong, but we certainly weren't hurting for moisture. And
I don't see anything abnormal for Ontario at this point. I think, normal is a good word, as we discussed. And I think things will look fairly normal, perhaps a little bit wet at times during the spring, but I do not see any indications of drought at this point.
Okay, well, that's good news because I will relate that there are some around my neck of the woods that were saying that they were getting sort of a 2012 vibe for this area, which was a drought for this area. So, let's I'll take your forecast if that's okay, because that one sounds better.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna guess you've got quite a bit more science behind yours. So there we go. I'm gonna stick with that one. Now I would be remiss if I didn't, of course, bring in, and I know you focus on Canadian weather for sure, but obviously these weather patterns impact the U.S. as well, and gigantic corn and soybean growing region there. Um, how significant is the dryness in the West? Does it like how bad is it in the U.S.?
Well, it's real bad in the Southwest. Just drew a drought map up yesterday, and I mean, exceptional drought, which is worse than extreme throughout much of Nevada, Arizona, Utah, and New Mexico. And again, it's early. We're just going into the dry season in those places, so very concerned about those areas. And some of that does extend into the southern high plains of the United States as well. But there are indications we may start to see some moisture in those areas the next couple of weeks. But again, the drought in the Southwest looks terrible right now. I'd say that's a good word to describe it.
And now I'm thinking back just a few years ago, there were some pretty widespread areas of drought as well. Is this lining up similarly to like which year? Is it also lining up with 2018 as well?
Yeah, I'm not sure about 2018. I get my years confused, but this is looking as bad as some of the bad years we've had in recent years. Again, La Nina is not conducive for much rain in the Southwest U.S. because the storm track is too far north up towards British Columbia. So this is not surprising that this is what's happening in the southwestern U.S., the expanding drought. So not a surprise at all, and this will set that area up for probably water shortages and whatnot through the summer. The only good thing I can say is snowpack has been recently pretty good in the Sierra Nevada and points north through the Cascades. So water availability, at least in central and northern California on north, should be pretty good through the spring. But southern areas, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, Utah, those areas probably going to be having some issues due to, again, low snow totals this winter.
So I find it interesting, and perhaps this is just the year that it is, or because we're all at home and talking about this face to face more. But I have found it fascinating in this past winter. I don't know that we've ever talked as much about snowpack and snowfall and that impacting water availability as we have this past year, and I don't know why that is, but
Yeah,
it seems to
I
be
think just
something that
people
we didn't
more
talk
getting
about.
more, the media getting more in tune with the problems that we're seeing here. Is in general, the trends are for less snowfall in the mountains here over the past several decades, and with less snowpack, obviously, is less snow to melt during the spring and early summer months, and that again reduces our water supply. So I think just there's more media attention to that, which is a good thing. That needs to be certainly addressed. Some years you'll get some bonus snow in the mountains again, but the overall long-term trend is certainly downward, especially in the western United States.
And that snowpack and that snow melt, are we talking groundwater recharge? Are we talking for irrigation? Are we talking both? What is the major impact of that?
I'd say irrigation is the biggest concern from what I'm seeing. Yeah, I would say in those areas, the irrigation would be the big one there. Again, very concerned about what the summer is going to turn out to be like in the Southwest, May, June, July, before the monsoon typically takes hold late in the summer, which helps things out a bit, but usually a little too late.
Okay. Um, so far, I'm going to say that Ontario's winning. So that's what I'm going to go with right now, is that my forecast sounds the best. So I'll take that. Now I do, you did mention before we hit record here, with your role with AccuWeather, you do a lot of the graphics. So,
Yes.
what, do you enjoy that? Like what part do you
I
like
love
about
it.
that? That's, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's
So
funny.
which,
I mean, my early years, I did a lot of radio, actually. I
oh,
was on the
okay.
air doing a
There
lot
you
of
go.
radio, but every day after my shift, my throat would get sore. So I said, I'd move on to something else. So yeah, I've been drawing graphics for AccuWeather for about 10 years now. It's very creative. Every day it's different. You got to draw up something different and come up with ideas. And what's great about it is you're constantly thinking, and the day goes by very quickly. It doesn't drag on. So before you know it, the day is almost done, and I've done about 25 graphics or so each day, and a lot of those go on our AccuWeather.com. Sure. And TVs use them. They get distributed all over the place. So we try to make them simple, easy to understand, and a picture is worth 1,000 words. Certainly, a lot of people don't have time to read big summaries and whatnot. But if we can just put a few bullet points on a graphic with some color, it can really tell a story.
We're just simple people sometimes, right? So, but what are some of the most popular ones then? If these get picked up by media and shared, what are the best ones?
I'll tell you one of the most popular ones, which is kind of surprising to us, is viewing conditions for astronomical events. Believe it or not. Yeah, it's not even weather related. Yeah, we do a simple graphic that shows good, fair, poor conditions for like such a meteor shower or comet or whatever is going on, and those are extremely popular. For whatever reason, people like just get out and check out that stuff. But very simple graphic, doesn't take long to draw, but those are very, very popular. Believe it or not, of course, the snow maps are always very popular as well, too, snow accumulation maps.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I would have never guessed that.
And no, I would never.
Yeah,
never either.
No, and and also it's one of those things. Okay, so he says it's going to be good, and you go out there and there's a cloud in the way, and that's the end of it.
Yes.
So there you go. Yeah.
But we said it wasn't going to be perfect either.
Yeah, so exactly. You said good, not great. That was another whole graphic.
That's right.
Yeah. So I would have guessed something either like rainfall totals after, or accumulated snow. I think maybe that's a Canadian thing, is that, we're very interested in how much
snow. Everybody in Canada wants so much snow, rain, whatever, especially in the East. Farmers care about the rain, but most everyone else just cares about snow. So, snow obviously is a big one for many people, and we try to get that right. Rain, you'd be surprised, though. We don't do too many rainfall maps because not many people go outside and actually measure rain. You eyeball it, except farmers, of course. But
yes, we do it a lot.
Person, you don't say, "Oh yeah, look at that! There's 2 inches of rain out there." Well, most people don't. But everybody knows how much snow fell. So
yes. Oh, that's interesting, right?
Because
you can see it. Whereas if you don't have a rain gauge,
that's right.
Every farmer has several, because then it's important to know like how much fell in the yard and how much fell on the other farm and how much fell. So these are very important things, and the best fun is when you go to visit a friend and it rains, you go and pour water in their rain gauge, and then you see how long it takes them to tell their neighbors. I've never done that.
That's happened one time on my rain gauge, actually. Yeah. I was not very happy.
No, I bet not, especially if you're counting on it for something.
The problem is with my rain gauge, the birds also poop in the rain gauge, so so that clogs it up. So we got to make sure we clean that out every now and then.
Yeah, every now and again, I suppose. Yeah, you'd think they'd find somewhere else to bother you.
No, they like rain gauges.
Yeah, okay. Well, why not? Well, actually, I have, as an aside, I have guinea keats, so guinea hens, that eat ticks, which they're fabulous. I love these birds, but they're hideous, they're very loud, and they actually fly, and they like to roost in trees or on tractors, and then they poop on the tractors. And so my partner does not like the guinea keats because they sit on his tractor and they poop on his tractor. So I enjoy them. They keep the ticks down. Which I was going to say, do you ever do a tick forecast? Like, do you ever do a graph for like if the ticks are out? Because I'm starting to get in. It's March. I'm starting to get in tick phase here.
I have not, but I think our company has put out tick. How bad the tick season is going to be. Seasonal type outlooks like that. I mean, obviously, tick season's already started. I know someone who went out in the woods the other day came back with 16 ticks on them. So unfortunately. It doesn't take anything.
Yeah.
No,
they're terrible. Well, so the reason I bring it up actually is because ticks, as soon as it's above freezing, really, the ticks start to be active, right? So pretty much. Yeah.
So that's kind of ruins going out into the woods, walking. So that's just another thing. Another reason for us to stay cooped up here in these houses, which we've been for about a year now. So can't go out walking in the woods because of the ticks.
Because of the ticks, yeah. And at this point, I think I take the ticks. Although, just, make sure you use your bug spray and all that sort of stuff. And if you find a tick,
Right.
please send it in. Yes, because I am in an area with tons of Lyme disease, so very important.
Yeah.
Okay, this is, I know we have got off topic, which anyone who knows me will not be surprised in any way. So thank you for for indulging me. Dieter Schwartz did mention that he wanted to see some sort of rain dance, which I am not going to do. So sorry, Dieter. You're going to have to do your own rain dance. So Dieter is based in Manitoba, that much I know, and it is very dry there. Although they did get that little bit of snow today. But let's hope that someone does the appropriate rain dance and they get some rain.
One thing I want to bring up, looking at the latest 1 month out, I do not see, at least at this point, any indications of any unusual cold outbreaks across much of southern Canada. It looks like the cold will be concentrated up towards Alaska and maybe the Yukon. But as long as that pattern holds, that would favor, again, no surprise late season freezes from what we're seeing right now. So nothing looks terribly unusually cold for April from what the signals we're seeing right now for much of southern Canada.
Okay, well that will definitely be of interest, certainly for those who may be tempted, certainly to head out early to do some of that seeding. That's late April is not completely out of the ordinary for certain areas, of course, of southern Canada. So and on the prairie, so that's not necessarily out of the ordinary, but we'll see. So if it's going to stay warm, yep, you may as well roll.
That's right.
Okay.
It's early yet. It's only still March, so we got a ways to go yet. So things can change. But that's what it looks like right now.
All right. Well, Brett, thank you so much for this. This has been fantastic. I'm certain that we'll get some follow-up, of course, and say, what did he say about this? So don't worry, everyone. We'll be sharing this on our social media. It'll be in our e-newsletters, so make sure you're signed up for those so that you don't miss anything and tell your friends. But Brett, thank you so much for taking some time today and joining us for RealAg Live.
Sure. And I'll be happy to answer those questions later on. No problem.
Sounds great. All right. Thanks so much for joining me today here on RealAg Live. We do go every weekday at 3 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Mountain. I'm not quite sure who's coming up tomorrow, to be honest. I should probably check the schedule a little more often. Anyway, thanks so much for joining me here. Thanks for your comments, for your questions. And hey, I wish I had better news, but Western Canada, it's dry. It's probably going to stay dry. See you, everybody.